Hello and welcome to The Mirror. My name is Rick Novy and this is my podcast. I'd like to thank Tom Pendergrass for helping me come up with the name, Novy Mirror, although I seem to be shortening it just to The Mirror, so we'll see which name sticks. Today my guest is Lawrence M. Schoen. He is a speculative fiction writer as well as an expert in the language of Klingon. So we'll get to talk to him in a moment. I do want to apologize ahead of time because I did have some microphone problems for about the first 90 seconds of the interview, but the vast majority of it is quite audible and the noise disappears after a little bit. I want to keep that content in because it's good stuff. So without further ado, here we go. We're coming today from Scottsdale's famous Valley Ho Hotel, and my guest today is Lawrence Schoen. Welcome, Lawrence. Although you've been a top-notch writer, and that's pretty much been documented by your being nominated for the Campbell Award in 2007, I believe. You're better known right now as the Klingon guy.
I am, sadly. Well, maybe not sadly, but I think that's going to hang over me regardless of what endeavors I do. That's it's Star Trek. Star Trek always overshadows everything else.
So you were involved with the creation of the Klingon Language Institute.
I'm the director of the Klingon Language Institute. Going on, I think this is our 19th year now.
Great.
Way too long for something that was supposed to last about 6 months.
So why don't you give us a demonstration of Klingon language? Which translates to, I love them.
Reveal military secrets.
I cannot reveal military secrets. That's a great one. And have you done any consulting with actual Star Trek projects?
Well, there are different levels of Star Trek projects. I haven't worked on any of the films, or I came close to doing some work for Enterprise series. I was actually going to get to write Vulcan dialogue for Brent Spiner, and I was out of the country the week they needed that, and ironically I was out of the country. I was in the south of France at the Cannes Film Festival with a documentary on the Klingon Language Institute.
How fun.
And so I'm missing the calls from the producer at Enterprise, who was a language nut and was eager to do this. But then, as it turned out, the whole thing got scrapped anyway. But the chance to write Vulcan dialogue would have been really exciting.
So do you know a lot of Vulcan as well as Klingon?
No, there's very little Vulcan that's ever been done. But I was given permission by Mark Okrand, who before he created Klingon, did some Vulcan for the first Star Trek film. And he was unavailable to do this work. And he said, go ask Schoen. He can do this for you. But it turned out I couldn't do it either. I was out of the country. But the KLI and I have done work for a number of other things. There was a Paramount theme park commercial a few years back where the Klingon comes on, full warrior guard comes on, his face filling the entire screen, and he just barks at you. And there are subtitles in English, and he's basically saying, "Come to King's Dominion, ride the rides like a warrior," or something like this. And they just had English copy, and they said, "Hey, wouldn't this be great to do it in Klingon?" And they contacted us, and we translated it, and I also sent them an audio tape saying it for them so that their actors could get the pronunciation right, and a series of transcripted notes that they'd be able to follow to try to approximate some of the sounds that don't occur in English. So we've done things like that. A few years back when CBS, and this is part of the irony of these things, Paramount, when they were doing the original series, which aired on NBC, Paramount was then bought by Viacom. Viacom was bought by some other larger corporation, which then spun it off, and now CBS owns it. So it's a completely different network. But
we have a visitor.
I have a visitor there. Hello. Let's put you over here. Oh, this will be dealt with in editing, I'm sure. CBS was releasing high-definition DVDs of the original series in time with, I think, the San Diego Comic Convention. And they wanted this 4-page press release in Klingon. And they approached me about that, and I convinced them that the whole gag would be nailed after, long before you finish the first page, that you didn't need 4 pages of Klingon, that there are going to be, less than 100 people who are going to ever be able to read. So we got it down to about half a page of Klingon, and they were very happy with that. And over the years, different companies have bought licenses from Paramount to use Star Trek trademarks, and they've wanted Klingon translations of things. We did like a carpenter's tool, a stud finder, electronic stud finder, wanted copy in Klingon. I don't know why. When you are constructing the Great Hall, use this. I don't know. It was bright yellow plastic, and you put a battery in, and it beeped. But they wanted it in Klingon, so things like that come along about once a year. Somebody wants something, and we've done a couple comic books. When one company or another has had the Star Trek license, we did the I can't remember the name of the comic book company. They were doing Starfleet Academy, and they did an issue entirely in Klingon. And then 2 weeks later, they published the same issue in English. Unfortunately, it was their penultimate issue, so we never got to see what kind of letters it would have gotten. And then I think last year, a new company has had the Star Trek license, and they did a 4-part Klingon story, and the first issue was all in Klingon. We did that for them, and that was a lot of fun.
At the top of the interview, we mentioned that you were nominated for the Campbell Award for Best New Writer, and you attended Worldcon, I think it was last year in Japan. What was that like?
Wow. Well, two very different pieces of it. I was a finalist for the Campbell in 2007 in Yokohama, and it was extraordinary. When they notify you that you're by an email that you're a finalist, and I thought it was a joke. I didn't think it was going to happen, and I thought, well, how easy would this be? Because I didn't know who the person was. How easy would it be to just fake an email and say, oh, you've been nominated for the Campbell. Rick, you've been nominated for the Campbell. And everybody's nominated for the Campbell. And so maybe I'm just a paranoid person by nature. So once they were able to convince me, no, this is real, and you can't tell anybody till we make the announcement in the week, but we want to make sure you're okay being nominated. That was exciting, and it generated a lot of buzz. I think that typically it's been changing and the award has been changing. But normally people are nominated on the strength of their first novel. My first novel hadn't come out. In fact, as we sit here talking, my first novel is coming out in 2 weeks. So I was nominated on the strength of years and years of short stories, and the rules were just changing. So, and I was grandfathered. Now there are many more markets that start your Campbell clock, as it were. And I've been writing for 10 years before I sold to one of the 4 markets, in effect, that would start that clock. So I don't know if it was appropriate. People were saying, why? He's been around a long time. How is he a new writer? But I didn't make the rules, and I was happy to get the little pin that says, "Hey, you're a finalist," and it was a very great honor. Japan itself, other than taking 24 hours to get there from Philadelphia to Tokyo, Japan was astonishing and amazing, and I got to shake hands with the man who created Astro Boy. At a little meet and greet between science fiction writers of Japan and science fiction writers of America. And it was an incredible experience. I I highly recommend the Worldcon for anybody who can go, particularly when it's outside the U.S. It's an extraordinary experience.
Yeah, changing tracks a little bit, you have a series of short stories involving a character who is a Buffalito. Can you tell us about Buffalito? And I think you have something in your hands there that...
I do, he said, mugging for the camera. This is Buffalito Destiny, my first novel, and it continues the characters. The protagonist is a former stage hypnotist, the amazing Conroy, and his alien animal companion Reggie, who is a Buffalito or a buffalo dog. And Buffalitos are basically, picture the American bison scaled down to about the size of a bread box with big anime eyes, just adorable as heck. And they can eat anything, and they fart oxygen, and wild hilarity ensues. So the Conroy stories are generally very lighthearted, and most of them tend to feature buffalo dogs or just Reggie, and the kind of hijinks that happen when you have an animal that can bite its way through space habitat or anything else you might imagine.
Okay, and another aspect that people may not know about you is that a couple of years ago you started your own small press, and your first publication there was a collection of short stories called Codex Prime.
Prime Codex.
Prime Codex.
Prime Codex came about because of, Prime Codex is a reprint anthology featuring work from the online writing community Codex, and this also goes back in effect to a convention. It was the Nebula Awards a few years back, and actually they were here in Arizona, I think it was, and I wasn't able to go. And some of the Codex members came back, and they'd had a great time. They were talking about what a wonderful professional experience it was, and some of the conversation was about how they wanted more of a collective presence, that Codex as an organization should be recognized and known to people outside of just the members of Codex. And my response to that was to say, well, I'll publish an anthology. And when I started looking into that, I realized it wasn't that much more work to set up an imprint and start up my own small press over and above just doing the one book. And that's where Paper Golem LLC came from. And we've done one other book. We basically have two projects going every year. One is a collection or anthology of novellas, original novellas, because it's my feeling there aren't very many markets for novellas. Unless you're Connie Willis, you're not going to sell a novella to one of the major magazines. Hi, Connie. And there are some great novellas out there. Chris Rush once said the novella is the ideal length for science fiction, and I tend to agree. And my thinking was, well, if this is Field of Dreams, build it and they will come. That there are all these great novellas out there that people have written, didn't want to expand into novels, couldn't sell them, and they put them in a trunk. And if I said, hey, boys and girls, I'm looking for novellas, I'd start getting all these wonderful novellas, and they started coming in. I'd conceived of that project at the same time that my friend Jay Lake had come to me saying, Lawrence, I've got a group of authors and we all have novellas. And it was just an example of serendipity. And that became Alembical, and the goal now is to do Alembical Volume 2 and Alembical Volume 3 every year, a new collection of original novellas. The other book we'll be putting out, is another series, if you will, is a single author collection to promote new and upcoming writers. And so this year right now it's in galleys, and we're waiting for the blurbs and reviews to start coming in. A simply beautiful collection by Cat Rambo, and we're taking pre-orders for that now. And I've already bought several of the novellas for next year's. I've already started buying novellas for next year's volume of Alembical, and I have a couple authors I've spoken to for the next collection or two. But it changes the way I look on things, because I come to being a publisher as an author first, and so I'm much more sensitive to the author's side of the contract, and what authors look for, and it's gotten me into trouble with other publishers who want to buy a story of mine for a collection, and they send me the contract, and I say, this contract sucks. I'm paying much more for my authors than you're paying for your authors. What's going on here? But it's also worked out very well because there's my publisher of my novel has also been my publisher for several short stories in his anthologies, and so we have a publisher-author relationship, but we also have a small press to small press relationship, and it's just been mutually beneficial.
Great. By trade, you're a psychologist, if I'm not mistaken.
My doctorate is in cognitive psychology, and I used it, as it were, as a college professor for 10 years, and then I was seduced away to the dark side of private industry by, ironically, one of my former graduate students, who's the CEO of a medical center that does mental health and addiction treatments. And so I came on board originally as a consultant, and now I'm their chief compliance officer, which is a lot like being a research psychologist, except the experiment is the company, and I'm controlling, and all the variables are things that can get in the way of our doing our job, and I'm trying to lessen variance and apply rules and order and structure. And it's a very different kind of work, but it's always something new and different and interesting.
So do you find that that sort of work helps you with your writing?
At times it does. Certainly my training as a cognitive psychologist influenced everything I do as an author. There's a lot of cognitive processes in my work, a lot of talk about memory and language. For example, one of the constraints I put on myself in the Conroy stories is that every alien group that we're introduced to has a form of telepathy, and it's always something different, some different mental ability because English glosses them all under telepathy. So in the first story, there's a group of aliens, the Arconi, who look at you and know whether or not you're telling the truth. There's simple, I can read your mind. There's people who can track you in your dreams in another story, and so forth. And all of this feeds into different aspects of memory and perception and language, and all of that comes from my training as a psychologist. Sure.
And do you find wearing both hats? How do you fit that into a busy life?
Sometimes I don't, quite honestly, and recently it's had impact on my health. But I have a really, really good day job arrangement where it's not a standard 40-hour work week. So I get to leave earlier in the day than most people, and I get to go home and I can then write for the rest of the day, or work on somebody else's book, or ideally a little bit of both. But juggling that is sometimes a real challenge, and as my wife is reminding me on a very regular basis, particularly when I get caught up wearing the publisher hat and my own output as an author can suffer. It's still new enough that I haven't worked out the proper balance, but I don't want to give it up. So I'm still trying to find that right balance, and I think it's going to be a function of what projects I'm working on. Likewise, along the similar lines, now I want to write novels, but novels are a lot harder to sell than short stories. They also take a lot longer, and it's a much bigger investment of time. And to do it right, one really needs an agent. So do I take time out of writing to pursue agents and so forth? And it's not as easy as they make it look on TV, but that also keeps it fresh.
So I want to cap off the interview with a question that I expect that I'm going to be asking pretty much everybody that I'm going to talk to, and that is, there's been a lot of talk in the last 5 or 10 years among the speculative fiction community that maybe we're at the end of science fiction, and science fiction has nothing more to say, or it's a dying genre. What do you have to say to that, and what do you see the genre doing in the next 10 or 20 years?
I don't believe that for an instant. I'm going to turn right to the camera and say this now. Don't believe that for an instant. I think science fiction is still the literature of ideas, for one thing. Certainly, what I believe people mean when they bring up that point is that, our forecasting, that window has shrunk. I remember as a child reading Heinlein stories that were set in 1972, and well, you can't do that anymore. He wrote it in the 50s or whatever, but that was the future then, and now it's my childhood. So that's not going to work. The window is closed, and as we're approaching Vinji's singularity, it gets harder and harder to predict to imagine devices that we don't have. We still don't have our flying cars, and that pisses me off. But I look at people like Carl Schrader, who I think is writing the next science fiction in terms of technologies that are ahead of us, and I think he's doing a brilliant job. And I would encourage everyone to go out and read Lady of Mazes, which will just blow your mind if you haven't read it yet. I was just reading something in a popular science magazine the other day on metamaterials, where everything we know about physics goes out the window. Everything we know about optics, for example, is based on the notion where we're using glass for lenses. And now with new technology and these metamaterials, literally materials beyond the materials we're familiar with, they're doing optics with anything but glass. They're bending light around objects to, in effect, make invisible things. And it's just crazy. They're making non-ferrous magnets through this kind of technology. So we haven't even begun. I think we're about to see another big boom that's going to impact science fiction the way nanotechnology did some years ago. So we're going to have all new flavors of goo. But none of that's the real issue. The real issue, and I say this as a soft science fiction writer, as a social science fiction writer, I think science fiction is going to continue because we haven't even begun to tap into the science of the mind, the human element, psychology, sociology, these areas of study that science fiction hasn't tapped yet. Science fiction has barely begun to explore, and that's still very much what storytelling is about. It's exploring the human condition. The trappings, whether it be ray guns and rocket ships or alien worlds or what have you, that's not so much what makes it science fiction. I think what makes it science fiction is taking an idea in a new direction. And that's the heart of it. And then what you do with it is just what kind of story do you want to tell. So you get to have science fiction mysteries, you get to have science fiction westerns, you get to have science fiction romance. Very popular subfield right now, but it's still science fiction.
Well, great. Thank you very much for appearing on The Mirror.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure having you here. And best of luck with the book. You want to hold it up?
Let's hold the book up again.
Buffalito Destiny, coming out end of May, is it not?
End of May, Memorial Day weekend.
Memorial Day weekend.
Buy a copy for your mom.
She'll love it. Thank you very much. Well, I hope you enjoyed that interview with actually Dr. Schoen, and I'm sure he would say, go out and buy the book. So, the one thing that I regret is the sound problems in the beginning, which unfortunately pretty much garbled out his little sentence in Klingon. But if you'll hang on the show until after the end of the credits, I'll have a little surprise for you. And now we move on to our news segment. The first thing I wanted to do here was announce the Sidewise Award nominees, which is the award for historical alternative fiction. That's not what I mean. Alternate history, that's what I mean. So you get me, you get the mistakes too. The nominees for Best Short Form are The People's Machine by Tobias Buckell, Poison Victory by Albert E. Cowdery, A Brief Guide to Other Histories by Paul Macaulay, Nightbird Soaring by T.L. Morganfield, Sacrifice by Mary Rosenblum, and G-Man by Christine Catherine Rush. The nominees for the Best Long Form are The Affinity Bridge by George Mann, Nation by Terry Pratchett, The Dragon's Nine Sons by Chris Robertson, Swiftly by Adam Roberts, and Half a Crown by Joe Walton. Have you seen the new Star Trek film? I have, and this is my review with no spoilers. I will keep it to one sentence. What have you done? Finally, the Dayton Daily News reports a mystery novel by Roger Zelazny has been published 14 years after his passing. I can't read my own writing. An agent found the 1971 manuscript 2 years ago. He stumbled across it in a warehouse in New York while digging through some other papers. The book is entitled Dead Man's Brother, or The Dead Man's Brother. So hopefully that will satisfy the longings of the Zelazny fans who are longing for new material. Well, and that is Novy Mirror number 1. If you are a speculative fiction personality and are interested in appearing on the Mirror and you plan to be in the Phoenix area sometime soon, you can contact me by email at mirror@cactusrunvideo.com. If you are a genre personality and are not planning to be in the Phoenix area anytime soon, we can still do this. I'm going to be doing a lot of my my interviews by remote. Excuse me, and that will it's basically going to be your webcam send me the video in answer to my questions. That's the sort of thing that I'm going to have to do because Phoenix is pretty isolated, as you can see. But once in a while we get somebody here. If you have any genre news, if you run Speculative Fiction Magazine, you can also submit any press releases to the same email address. I'm not interested in reading names of authors appearing in magazines. As you can tell by when I read the award nominees, it gets kind of tedious and I have trouble pronouncing anybody's name anyway. But that all said and done, I hope you enjoyed number 1. Next time I have, unfortunately, just an audio interview with Aliette de Baudard, who is a speculative fiction writer, mostly fantasy, who is a native of France. However, she writes exclusively in English for her speculative fiction, and she's a fascinating person, very intelligent woman, and I think the audio content will make up for the lack of the video that we'll have on that one. We will have a video podcast, but we'll split between a photograph and me looking stupid over here. So until next time, bye-bye.
Chorov a konwijig ed pakwij och dodge van je ed lat je dag